Yeah.
Senator Platt.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kingsley, for being here. We're spending an awful lot of time on the vouching, and there are many other parts of the bill, and Senator Frum has alluded to a few of them very well in some of the questions that she's asked. But I'm going to spend a little more time on the vouching, because that seems to be the issue that everybody is focusing on, and the opposition is. It seems to me that when they don't have proper arguments, they say it's not constitutional. That's the easiest way to argue any bill that has come before us. And we're going to have later on today a lawyer that will, I think, say it is constitutional, so I'm looking forward to that. Do you have any idea, sir, how many people needed vouching in the last election because they forgot their ID as opposed to not having proper ID?
I do not know that, sir. I did not study that phenomenon at all.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that, and maybe there is no records.
The whole point of it is that there are no records. This is what is missing.
Well, there are records about the irregularities, that there were 50-some thousand that were pertaining to vouching,
Right.
And I'm not sure whether they know this, but nevertheless, I may ask that of others yet. You did talk about in your testimony a few minutes ago about walking around without ID that has your address on it.
Yeah.
I walk around without ID that has my address on it many times, and before I asked the question, I went through my little clip to see if I had something with an address, and I noticed I did have my driver's license in there, so it does have an address on it, but many times I walk around. However, we don't just walk around and walk into a polling station. We go there for a purpose. We leave home for the purpose of voting, so it's not just walking around. So I would think that I would maybe, if I knew what kind of identification I needed, that I would maybe bring it with me as opposed to leaving it at home. And I guess that is why I asked the question about how many people do this by accident. I would think most people would take the ID required of them, and as the minister explained earlier today with the attestation, which in my opinion is a form of vouching. If I am the manager of a home care facility and the seniors there don't have the ID required, I can attest that they live at that particular place. So that would still be a form of vouching, would it not?
Well, I was at the back of the room and Mr. Mayrand was explaining, I think it was to Senator Frum, how that is a good idea, but getting people to act voluntarily on that front is problematic. If you were to put in the bill that they must provide those letters of attestation, and not to do so would create an infraction, then that might become an alternative. But some people are just not willing to provide that. And you know, it's in some cases it's also very expensive for them.
I appreciate that. However, to create a bill because there are, and we need to make sure, I don't want to make light of that, we need to make sure that every individual in the country has their constitutional right to vote. But I would suspect that that number, when we talk about the 120,000 that needed vouching the last election, I would suspect that number would be considerably less. My last question to you is this, and I hate ever taking my information from the media, but I did read in newspaper article that you gave this bill an A- when it first came out. I'm wondering whether that grade has changed any since you first read it, and if so, were you a little quick to jump to an A-, or why the A- then and maybe something else now, if there is something else now?
Well, there is nothing else now.
So it's still A-?
There is nothing else now. And what I'm waiting for is to see what the changes are that through the various committees will be brought forth to the bill. And I've agreed with the media, some of whom are here, that once the bill is finalized and up for reading, I will rate it again. But in the meantime, there's no point in re-rating and re-rating. And every time there's an iteration by somebody else saying, are you still at A-, or are you looking at A, or are you looking at B minus minus? It's not helpful to the discussion. There's some very important points that are being made, and I don't want to take away from them, from the various people, by saying, okay, as a teacher, I'm now at B plus minus, it doesn't work that way.
Through my life, I was usually happy with a B plus.
I know.
Senator Batters.
Yeah, I was always happy with an A minus as a midterm grade. So I guess we'll see. Well, true, but A minus is pretty good. I wanted to just direct you to, because I appreciate the fact that you shortened your opening statement to conform to the time we have available today. So there were some parts of your opening statement that you handed out in writing which you didn't have too much time to get into. And I certainly can see from the number of points that you made listing positive elements of the bill, and then there were a few neutral ones and a few areas of improvement. I can certainly see how you came to that assessment. But one I wanted to talk about was the Director of Public Prosecutions issue. And my past experience was as the Saskatchewan Justice Minister's Chief of Staff, and in that capacity, although the Director of Public Prosecutions for Saskatchewan technically reports to the Minister of Justice, independence for that office is vital, and it's a very well-respected tenet of that office from the Minister's office. And I see that as directly translating to this situation here, and I'm just wondering how you would comment on that.
Well, I've read that section of the bill quite thoroughly, and I've put that in the neutral
Yes, I
side.
noticed that, yes.
And there were several relatively small concerns which I raised, and I'll raise them again. But the independence of the Director of Public Prosecutions exists under our system, even though theoretically, and in reality, he must meet, she must meet, it is now a he, with the Attorney General, because that is what is required. What is not known, and I've not heard it anywhere else, is that whenever it is an infraction under the Canada Elections Act, the Director of Public Prosecutions cannot discuss that with the Attorney General. That is an exception that was made, that was obtained when I testified before various committees on when we were dealing with the Accountability Act. So, but even if it were not for that, we still trust the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, if it is a criminal infraction perpetrated by a political party or a politician of any ilk, but not under the Canada Elections Act, we still have faith that he will go ahead and prosecute this in fairness. That has never been an issue. And the process by which we choose the DPP is a very thorough process. So that is why I am satisfied. Now, we heard the Chief Electoral Officer talk about the need to set up mechanisms so that there can be discussion. I would say that one thing that we should consider is having the Director of Public Prosecutions, having the Commissioner, the right to speak during an election about certain inquiries when it is in the public interest that he do so. Right now, he would be prevented under this bill. And I know how reluctant people are, politicians are, to see someone who's in charge of investigations report that the investigation is going on in this particular case, not only during an election, but it's worse when it's an election. So that's why we always adopted the policy when I was there, which I think is still there, which I'm sure is there, that we don't comment on investigation. But sometimes, we simply cannot say to a commissioner, you can never talk to the people. Because he or she may uncover, and I think you were alluding to this a short while back, he or she may be coming across something which it is in the public interest that it be made public. These are things that happen during an election in this country, and it would be helpful. This is what I meant in my statement when I said the trust of Canadians must be maintained. They must know that their people running the system are able to talk to them when something wrong is happening. We don't know what that would be.
Okay, we're moving on to you now.
I was just going to supplement. See, part of the problem with that is that you're innocent until proven guilty. And so what happens, a candidate's out there running, thinks he didn't do anything wrong, and all of a sudden, there's a headline covered across the country that this person has done something that's we believe is incorrect. And so what will happen is a commissioner who will do the investigation will turn it over to the Director of Public Prosecution. They will make that determination. So if you do it the other way, and trust me, when it hits the media, you're guilty. And you've got to run a campaign. And that's the problem, and that's why I agree with the way the legislation is now. But I want to get on to some other things, and I don't have anything too heavy here. I appreciate your remarks, and thank you for coming. The matter of voting, which I think is constitutional, the fact that what we're doing, is a problem. There's no doubt about that. And part of this, it's a funny thing about change and people adopting change. It takes time. And just as it is, that one has to, provide information when you go vote. You have to provide information when you exit the country. You have to provide information to get a health card. You have to provide information for everything. Education will bring this around, and practical experience will bring this around. And I leave that with you, because I do believe it's a matter of practice. And goodness knows there's enough advertising in election campaigns. If a person doesn't know that the election is on such and such a day, trust me, I don't know where they've been. The other thing I want to point out is that, and I'm not sure if I understood what you said with respect to fundraising expenses. Elections are very costly, extremely costly, and my experience with those that run elections and run fundraising campaigns and so on, hold on to those records. And particularly, ones that, whether it's duplicate, they're going back a second time or whatever, they are extremely cautious on expenses, and I happen to agree that this should not be an expense. Anyway, that's for what it's worth. Okay, you can comment if you like, but...
Well, I appreciate the expression of your views, sir.